where we left off, we were talking about the color adjustment window or panel, and I was talking about the diffuse colors being at the lower level of these color bars. And here's our gradient bar, and we were talking about the specular colors. All right, obviously transparency is going to have no color at all. Now let's move on and talk about how to adjust these color bars. Now it gets a little interesting, a little tricky, and you have to kind of just practice with it. Sometimes it doesn't make any sense what the application is doing. The application is following programmed functionality within its code. The application is very consistent in what it does. It just doesn't make stuff up as it goes along. It's a program. It's programmed. We don't fully understand the program. Now, at some point in this tutorial series, as I promised earlier, I'll actually fire up the code for the Mandelbulb 3D software, and we'll poke around a bit. And there is comments in there. We can actually look at the code. We can try to kind of understand what it does, how it does it, and kind of help us really understand what's going on under the covers. But for artists, we don't need to do that. What we do need to do is experiment, try things, change something, observe what happens, and kind of develop a memory of what that control does in, say, relationship to another control. So now with that said, all right, now let's do this. I'm going to leave these colors just the way they are, very radical, so that we can kind of see their effect. If we look over here on our main screen, there's no way that I would ever let this sort of a fractal presentation go out. But what it does do here, for purposes of discussion, is it shows me, as I had talked about in an earlier session, the relationship of the coloring to the z-axis. The z-axis is, away from the camera. And it's showing me here that I have red kind of at this z-axis position. Then I'm into blue, and then I've got some green and yellow up in here, and then I'm blue again and I'm red again. There's a relationship, as you can see here, between the coloring, or I should maybe the color bands, let's call that a band, all right, and the z-axis of the application. We could assume, if we were to consider the perspective that we're in, okay, so I've got let's see, I've got a scene where camera's here, and the scene, as it goes further away from the camera, all right, has a perspective of depth, this being the furthest away, that being closest to the camera. So we can assume that this upper area and this lower area is closest to the camera, and we could assume that this yellow is furthest away from the camera in terms of a simulated perspective. This is all simulation, obviously. Now, if we look at this picture and we assume that the red is closer to the camera and the yellow is furthest from the camera, and now we equate that to this color band, we see here red, all right? And that's closest to the camera. And we see yellow, which we're assuming by the simulation is furthest from the camera. And we also see here, what is this, like a light blue? Now look at that. Now that light blue is somewhere between closest to the camera, furthest from the camera, somewhere in the middle. And so there we go. All right. So your coloring has a close relationship to the z-axis. Now you can change that, which is very interesting. You can actually change where these colors fit within your Mandelbulb scene or with respect to a Mandelbulb object. Now let me just point out that you can change the position, I should say the z-axis position of your coloring, but that won't necessarily stick if you go change the structure of your Mandelbulb object. And that's why my particular workflow is you do the graphic first, then you do the lighting, then you do the coloring. So that you're not in a position where you've got some really nice coloring and then you go in there and you change your Mandelbulb object structure and now your coloring doesn't work anymore. All right, because of that relationship of the color on the z-axis of the Mandelbulb scene or object. So graphic first, lighting next, coloring next, and then you move on to things like you're rendering your still or developing your animation. Now let's do this. Let's change the position on the z-axis with our color adjustment window. So by holding down the left mouse button, I can actually move this color bar, and when I do that, I'm actually shifting the color band left or right, or more accurately, up and down the Z scale. So so here, so let's stop there. So what I've effectively done here is I have pushed my red further off to the background, which allows the blue, which we find right here, to be more dominant in the foreground. So let's watch the main screen. Watch the main screen. Red. Okay, you'll see that. You see? So I'm actually, let's get this all the way over here. So I would fully expect that this yellow is off to the background, which it is. Now this light blue, maybe turquoise, is now in the foreground. And look at this, my red is like virtually completely gone. It's eliminated from the scene. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. And it has to do with your settings back on the lighting panel. All right. Now, now we're getting into some. Now we're getting in deep here. This is getting pretty serious here. There's a couple controls that we can consider. Now, just put some stakes in the ground here. I'm trying to ask myself why that red band has been completely eliminated from my scene. Well, maybe not completely. There it is right there. It's just like way off. It's just like, it's nothing compared to what we had here. So where did that red go? It turns out that there's you have controls that you can utilize to adjust the Z range. You'll notice here that we have color variation on Z. All right, and if I take that control and I'm just going to tweak it around, look at that. You see, not taking a whole lot, not taking a whole lot of adjustment here. All right, but let's just stop right here. I'm going to leave that right there, and let's take a look at this now with my color variation on Z at this position right here. I have effectively moved this red in the looks like midstream. All right, and then this turquoise got right in here, and my yellow is basically dominating a very full range of the Z-axis. Let's come over here and move that around like this. Okay, I didn't touch anything over here. Now what I have is I have my yellow is very dominant, and I have green in here. Green is a combination of yellow and red, and I have my turquoise red in here. Now we're gonna end this session now, but I'm gonna show you. See that little indicator there? Maybe we'll call it U. If I put my slider right on top of that, okay, it's a little tricky, but this is the only gradient I have. Okay, right on top of that little indicator is basically the neutral position for my color band. You see my red in here, you see my yellow, you see my turquoise. Well, let's just get that back over right. Let's just get everything nice and evenly spaced. And now my red is off in the background. My blue is right here. My yellow is way off there. Here's the point. You can actually control the variation of your coloring along the Z-axis with this control right here. And that is intimately related to your diffuse color band as you've defined over here. All right, enough for this session. We'll continue this discussion in the next session. I'll see you there.